Omni Sports Breakfast with MKT and Kevin McCallum.
But now we're going to speak a little bit to Mr. Cash and Sport, because there is breaking news. Launching at the start of 2026-2027, the Premier League will bring all international media content production and distribution in-house. Why is that important? For 20 years, this service has been provided in partnership with IMG, operating as Premier League Productions. Now, what hasn't been sort of revealed and made clear is whether they will be streaming the matches. We must make sure we differentiate between, we've seen a lot of South Africans. Julia Stewart is now working, the brilliant Julia Stewart. She's working as a continuity sort of presenter at Premier League Productions at the moment. The Premier League say, all right, thanks so much, IMG. We've had enough. We're going to bring this thing in-house. And that is a massive, massive break, because we've seen globally that this can happen. All right, we got Mr. Cash and Sport, Africa's leading business analyst. Mr. Nqobile, let's get straight into it. I mean, IMG, from what we understand, for 20 years have been Premier League's partners in terms of being Premier League Productions. When did that relationship start, and how did it develop, and where are we now with that?
So the relationship began, MKT, in 2004. And the reason why it began is because the Premier League, as we know, had since about around 1994 been the global leader in terms of, when you started watching the Premier League globally, you started being able to watch it in around the 90s, 94, etc., like globally. So what IMG had been doing even since then was starting to provide, because IMG is a very old company. It was established in the 1960s, I think in 1964 in America. And they established, if you remember back in the day, Transworld Sport was one of their products that they used to produce. And the partnership essentially has allowed the Premier League to be able to take things like continuity shows, like highlights and replays. Even the VAR is based in Stockley Park, which is a facility which is essentially co-owned by the Premier League and Premier League Productions. So that partnership has allowed the Premier League to not only broadcast the games themselves, but all of the other content that you get in and around the league, and the global shows that you find on, match week previews and the Ian and the Kelly and Righty show and so on and so on. All of that stuff is produced by IMG for the Premier League through a company joint venture called Premier League Productions.
So now, launching in 2026, all of that will come in-house. We're not sure about the matches, right, in terms of how that'll be distributed?
No, we are sure about the matches. So nothing will change in terms of the matches. Because remember, what Premier League Productions does is they help to produce almost all of the content. So the first thing that the Premier League will do is that they'll ensure that the production of the matches itself will still continue as it is. I don't think that will change. But what it will do is that it will allow the Premier League greater autonomy in terms of how that product is packaged. And then on top of that, the Premier League will then take over the production of all the content around the match, not inside the match and not within the 2 hours of the match, around the match. So the pre-match content, the post-match content, and also the distribution of that content globally as well, because that's what essentially IMG allows the Premier League to do. They allow them to broadcast that content globally and have that content visualized in multiple countries. So I don't think that and I know this was probably one of your future questions, is will we now be streaming the games? I don't think that's what will happen immediately. But it allows the Premier League the option to do that and to have a full-on in-house production of the Premier League.
Yeah,
I'll potentially stream it.
Amazing. I want to come back to that in a little bit more depth, but that's really, really interesting. So let's clarify, when does the deal actually kick in?
The deal kicked in 2004, but it will end in the 2026-2027 season, beginning 2026-2027 season. So for this year, this year's essentially over. 2025, 2026 will still be under IMG. And then at the end of next season, that's when the Premier League will fully take over. So essentially, they've got a year, one more season, to try and figure themselves out, build a team, and take over fully from IMG.
Very, very interesting, because I've seen a shift now, and I don't know what's going on in terms of linear production, but last night, for those who didn't see it, I prefer watching with watch-alongs in terms of football matches. I don't really watch commentary anymore. But last night was a really, really interesting moment to see Gary Neville's overlap having a watch-along for the Arsenal-Manchester United. It was dead boring because they don't know what they're doing, but that's not the point. I think it was interesting to see them already pivoting to that. I wonder what's going on there, and I wonder how future-facing they're trying to be. So really, really interesting stuff there. This is big news. This is big news. I mean, it must be a massive deal for IMG and the Premier League to bring this all in-house. Kev, what you got for Mr. Nqobile?
Yeah, no, as big a news as it is, it almost flew under the radar, because it was during the vote that they were having a vote on the associated party transaction deals. So it has flown under, but... I mean, who voted for it? Was it just the clubs? And do the promoted clubs have a say in the future of this?
Yeah, so the clubs voted for it. But part of the reason why it flew under the radar is because some people don't realize just how big IMG is and what they do for the Premier League. So to answer the first question, the clubs voted for it, and they were all in favor. Mm-hmm. Part of the reason for that is because it potentially means much more revenue for the league, because you don't have a middleman now to share revenue with. It's not clear, it's not public how much exactly the IMG gets from the Premier League broadcast, but the global and domestic commercial revenue for the Premier League went up 17% last year in the last cycle to about £12.2 billion. So it's a lot of money. Yeah. And if you consider that IMG, being a middleman, gets a cut of the revenue, essentially cutting them out and going direct to your potential distributors and other, because the Premier League is broadcast to over, I think it's the IMG broadcasts over 380 matches each season. Mm-hmm. They broadcast to over 900 broadcasters globally. And IMG produces about 45,000 minutes of content every season. So it's massive. It's truly massive. And for the teams in the league as well, they can only benefit from this, and the Premier League can only benefit from this in the long term if they get it right. It's a very big if, because kind of taking over that type of distribution it's a huge undertaking.
It's a behemoth. And you know what? We'll carry on after the break, because we Mr. Cash and Sport, who's joining us to discuss the Premier League Productions deal ending between IMG and the Premier League at the beginning of the 2026-2027 season. We've discussed when the relationship started, when the new deal kicks in, and who voted for this. But coming up in the break, after the break, is how will we want to talk about revenue, exactly the bottom line. How does this work out as well? Kev, you know what the Premier League clubs, I think, will need to know?
Do tell me.
Is that winning begins with what you eat. Boost your energy with AGT Foods range of nutritious grains and legumes. Play better, live healthier. Brought to you by AGT Foods Africa. Good food, good health, good life. Related to the Premier League is our question of the day. How many teams have won the Premier League? We'll answer that question at the end of the show. 60 seconds, we'll carry on with Mr. Cash and Sport.
Get on the air and join Africa's biggest Omni Sport conversation right now. WhatsApp us +27 788 777716.
Mr. Cash and Sport is joining us. We're discussing a massive story, which, as Kevin McCullum said brilliantly, is that it has gone under the radar slightly, considering the scale of what's going on. All Premier League productions, which were under the umbrella of IMG, are now coming under Stockley Park, or the Premier League productions, in-house. And we heard those revenues, over £12 million the Premier League made last year. They say, we'd like more of our own pie. Thank you very much. You've had the dessert, no more for you. Bringing it in-house. Listen, what you're going to do, big business is what it is. Nqobile, you said something really, really interesting before we went to the break about the clubs voting for it. One of the things that has always made it interesting in terms of the promotion relegation model is that it's not the collegiate model of American sport, right? I've always wondered. So in this situation, I guess they'll want to make, some of the articles I've seen say they're going to make documentaries, obviously in-house documentaries. We've seen Hard Knocks in the NFL that NFL Films makes, etc. Is what happens if, let's say, Birmingham City in 8 seasons get promoted or whatever, and they come to the Premier League and they go, no thanks, we don't actually feel this. I guess that's a little bit of a dilemma they'll have to iron out as they go, or have we got any information on that?
Yeah, I highly doubt that would be the case. So generally what happens is that they would have a Premier League board meeting, and the Premier League is structured in such a way that, yes, the majority, the majority votes, and what the majority decides is what's passed. As you remember in the Manchester City deal that we spoke about recently, Manchester City issue, the majority voted against the proposition of Manchester City, and what the majority wanted is what passed. The fact of the matter is, I mean, Manchester City in 2022-2023 made £166 million from broadcast revenue, from the equal share of broadcast revenue. Arsenal made 166, Man United made 158 million pounds. Those are the top three teams in terms of broadcast earnings. They're not going to say, no, we don't want more money. They're not going to say, no, we don't want to control how the Premier League is viewed and distributed globally in terms of its image and broadcasting. So Birmingham City, or whomever it is that comes up in 8 or however many years' time, if the revenue is going in the right direction, they're not going to have a say, because the other clubs will just keep on outvoting them. So I think as long as they keep on making money, and for all intents and purposes, I mean, just for context, for some people who don't understand just how impactful IMG has been. For Premier League productions, since it was incepted in 2004 with this partnership with IMG, back then, their overseas deals were around about £325 million. Overseas deals since then, in the 20 years, have increased to over £5 billion. Just from more exposure of the Premier League overseas, and then being able to bolt on sponsorships and other deals on top of it. So it's a massive, and I don't see that changing anytime soon, because the Premier League is become an even bigger global product, and it's not going to change.
I mean, that's a factor in excess of 10. You're looking at like a 14, 15 factor in terms of, and in such a short space of time. You think in the global scale, 20 years is nothing in terms of growing from 300 million to
5 billion.
Oh my God.
5 billion. To over 5 billion.
Oh, wow.
And they're still growing in Africa.
Yeah.
They still want to grow even further in Asia. They want to grow even further, obviously, in the Americas, with the potential of, they've had rumors about potentially taking games to the Americas. Almost every Premier League team tours the Americas and Asia. So yeah, the revenue is growing, and they want to bring that in-house. I think it kind of makes sense, but it's very difficult to do.
Yeah, this is hardly a new thing in top football. The Bundesliga's been doing this for several years. They've got their own in-house production company, and so does Serie A. But there are different organizations like the NFL, NBA. Would they use this league as a model of direct to consumer, or I mean, how does it work then? What do you think they would do, and what other leagues do you do this?
Yeah, so as you said, I mean, the Bundesliga does this. The NBA does a similar thing with the NBA League Pass. The NFL does a similar thing. Formula One has a similar kind of effort. I do think it's the way of the future of rights holders in terms of being able to control a certain element of the production, and being able to control the production line, so that you can also, you can play it both ways. You can go the traditional linear television route and have broadcast partners who broadcast your content for you, or you can stream it and have some content exclusive to the streaming app, which nobody else has access to, and you force people to subscribe that way, and maybe they get a few matches, or they subscribe via maybe a Super Sport, for example, for those in South Africa and maybe the rest of Africa, and then watch the regular content on that platform. So you could go both ways. It just allows you to be much more flexible and nimble, and have a lot more control really around the product, because ultimately at the moment, people, the Premier League as an organization itself is quite a small organization. Their job is setting out the rules and regulations of the league, commercializing the league, but they don't do a lot beyond that. So they have partners all over the place to help them to do that. But what they're trying to start doing now is take control even further of that product around the league, which isn't just the administrative part.
Yeah, I mean, are we looking at Premflix? I mean, are we going to go that direct to consumer, where they may just bypass the middleman, go straight to like a £9.99 value-added deal for people to stream?
Time will tell, Kev. I think it is very possible that they could do that, but I don't think that they'll do it everywhere. I think they could have a hybrid model where, in some parts of the world, they do have a Premflix type of offering. Perhaps in the UK, but the challenge also is they already have pre-existing agreements with the likes. For instance, they signed a new Sky agreement, which essentially kicks in, I think it's four or 5 seasons.
Yeah.
So in the immediate future, that's not possible. They can't just switch off and say, we'll only broadcast via the streaming platform. Those agreements, those pre-existing agreements don't need to run their course before they even decide to say, well, we're going to cut that off. And those broadcast agreements are very valuable. They don't, you haven't seen increase in broadcast revenues for no reason. It's very valuable to go that route. So, they have to weigh up the pros and cons. I think they might go with a hybrid model where they'll test it in certain markets first and see if it could potentially work. Where possibly then they don't see that they're getting as much revenue from a certain market, and then they could say, well, come directly to us, it'll be cheaper, but we'll get all the money. So I think they'll have to test it and see over a number of years to see what works and what doesn't. But ultimately, I think they'll go with a hybrid model where they'll have broadcast partners like your Big Sky and SuperSport in Africa, because also let's not forget, taking a product via streaming direct to customer also requires that you have the network. People have to have the ability to watch that content. In Africa, so many homes just don't have the infrastructure to do it. So you would be losing out on a huge potential market by doing that. So I think they'll go with a hybrid model.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really interesting one, because if you're just joining us, Nqobile and Ndlovu, Mr. Catch and Sport, we're talking about Premier League productions ceasing to be under the umbrella of IMG and going in-house with the Premier League in 2026, 2027. Myself as a consumer of the NFL, it is the one extra sports app I will pay for happily, for what you've said exactly. And it's amazing what you've revealed to us, because now that I'm thinking of my own user experience, is that I love the app journey is that it's video on demand as well for the shoulder content, which we've been talking about. Yes, I love the NFL. Yes, I love my Minnesota Vikings, but I want to see a little behind the scenes video. Where does Sam Donald live? Who's his grandmother? Like they give you all of this additional stuff, and it's all available on the app. But that's taken them sort of 2 decades to develop for the NFL, which is a $300 billion product over 10 years. And I mean, they're just on a whole nother level. So interesting to see where they take it here. And you've already told us about the linear production partners, because that's another big thing, right? I think with all modern people, particularly sometimes we all live in bubbles, is you forget sometimes not everybody has fiber. So business to consumer option for Africa, for South America, for parts of Europe, by the way, isn't available. It's just not an option for those consumers. So I think you've made an incredible deal about this incredible deal. Let me ask you one last question to get you out of here, Mr. Nqobile. For you, as somebody who is interested in the business of sport, in terms of the English Premier League, I've read lots of things where the American market in particular thinks the British football rights are undervalued. Do you think that the Premier League now know that themselves? And will the World Cup kind of tell them which direction to go? Because if the popularity in America of football booms like they're hoping, I would imagine then that pie is just going to grow exponentially.
Yeah, I do think that they know that, but also at the same time they know that broadcasters are dealing with consumers who are cash strapped, and globally the global economy has suffered. And you can't just decide. So yes, while they do know that, and I think it's part of the reason why they're taking production in-house, so that they control much more of the bigger future revenue. They also know that the economic state of the world doesn't allow for you to just decide. I think it'll be a a decades-long process to truly reap the rewards of this decision. But I don't, at the moment it's very challenging environment. But I do think that the Premier League, tap more into that American market, you will definitely see the rewards. It's difficult, obviously, because of the timing issue.
Yeah.
But that shoulder content that you spoke about is the way that you get into the hearts and minds of those people that don't have the ability to wake up to be awake at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, like, at 8 p.m. in the evening, like we are, and just watch it as part of your normal day. So yeah, I do think that future value is definitely appealing, but it'll take quite a while to realize it.
The beautiful game. It belongs to the people, and I think the best version of it as it stands from a marketing point of view. Some people might say La Liga have gone past the Premier League in terms of an actual product for the viewer, but the Premier League is certainly king in terms of the dollars. And now Premier League productions will cease to be under IMG, as we've spoken about. Mr. Nqobile and Ndlovu, Mr. Cash and Sport, quickly tell us, where can people find you? Because a lot of the things we talk about, people don't realize that you can actually do this for them in terms of research, etc. Where can people reach out to you should they need research done for their organizations, for their sporting facilities? Where can they reach out to you, bro?
Cashandsport.com, CASHNSPORT.com is our website. Contact details are also on the website. You can also drop us an email at info@cashandsport.com. And we're also under Cash and Sport on all social media platforms. We do provide research and advisory services for brands and rights holders and anyone else really in the business of sport and not just football.
There you have it. In any sport across the spectrum. Always a pleasure having you, bro. We get smarter just having you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. Cheers.
Man, Kev, that's a big deal. And you said it right. That just went under the radar.
But it's just suddenly popped up. I think I only realized that when you came in that one morning and said, hey, have you heard about this deal from IMG? And IMG have been there for 20 years. For me, thinking about this, and you also need to think about logistics. IMG have spent a fortune building infrastructure, studios, personnel, training people, getting technology, cameras. And that's going to be a big investment for them. So you're going to see the EPL running around, desperate to try and retain most of this IMG staff. So a lot of those guys will still have jobs, but it's going to take a massive investment. They probably have to spend 500-600 million pounds easy to start.
Easily. And IMG, remember, they've been sold to TKO Holdings for $3.2 billion recently. So there's all sorts of changes happening at IMG as well. But they're a massive, massive thing. Transworld Sport, didn't know that. He makes us smarter, Mr. Cash and Sport. All right, it's that time of the week. We all got to make a little kroner, some shillings for the weekend. It's Kevin's 5 bets. We're going to get into that 60 seconds. Kev's 5 bets.
Get on the air and join Africa's biggest Omni Sport conversation right now. WhatsApp us +27 788 777716.